I want to just welcome you here. It should be a lot of fun. We want to engage in discussion. We want to get you thinking differently, and we want to have a lot of fun. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce the brains behind the operation. Bart Jackson, come on up.
Well, it's good to see everybody here. Prepare to be uplifted. You're about to encounter some of the highest achieving and most effective men and women in our society. And the best part, really, is that each of them is ardently dedicated to creating a better planet, a better culture, and a better lives for all of us. I'm Bart Jackson, the CEO of Prometheus Publishing, and as Dale said, the founder of the Prometheus Social Enterprise Awards. And it's been my privilege to encounter every single one of the honorees that you'll meet tonight. And it's also been really my great joy to celebrate them and pass on some of the wonderful things that they have been doing and the way they've been helping people throughout the country. And as you hear the story of each of the Prometheus Awards honorees, I bet that just like me, you're going to walk away inspired, but also refreshingly happy that there are such people working among us for us. So, in the words of my wife's husband, one ambitious, iron-willed individual can scale the highest mountain, but one compassionate person surrounded by all his supporters can move it. So why don't we see how the mountains are being moved today? We're running a little late, folks, so good night. All right. Mel Duncan has founded and runs the Nonviolent Peace Force, and he's both the guiding spirit and operations manager of it. And I've got to realize that through many of you, I have been lying when I have told you what Mel does. I keep saying that Mel drops unarmed peacekeepers into war zones to protect civilians. And that's really completely wrong because, well, they're never unarmed. They just don't carry firearms. And they don't carry firearms simply because it would ruin the weapons that they use so well and wield so deftly. Mel Duncan proves that, Mel's proved two things. Number one, that the rape, slaughter, and pillage in war of civilians is not a necessity, but rather it is a removable cancer. And the second thing Mel's done, he has taken that civilian casualties are things that do not require larger firearms to stop, but rather they can be halted with their own weapons that Mel has invented, and they all use so successfully. Ladies and gentlemen, please meet Mr. Mel Duncan of the Nonviolent Peace Force.
Good afternoon. And thank you, Bart, and thank you everyone who's here this afternoon. I really didn't find anything. When you said it, I founded Nonviolent Peace Force. Nonviolent Peace Force, the idea of trained unarmed civilians protecting other trained unarmed civilians was a recurrent vision and had occurred and recurred to enough people. Gandhi was working on the Shanti Sena, the peace army, when he was killed. Others had picked up this idea and moved it forward. And so more than being a founder, I was one of the people who held the focus so that people could come together and create. I was struck when you called me and said that I was going to be given the Prometheus Award. And when I think about Prometheus, I think about how he stole fire from Zeus and brought it to us. And as I reflect more deeply, the first image that comes to my mind is to think about Oppenheimer and the Manhattan Project, who stole fire and burned to death over thousands of people, and put in our hands for the first time the ability to destroy life as we know it. And fire, I think about the 70,000 fires that are incinerating our planet's lungs in the Amazon this summer. But let me tell you about another fire, a fire that burns more brightly within souls, a fire that continues to ignite our moral imaginations and forge our courage. As Gandhi reminds us, 1,000 candles can be lighted from the flame of one candle, and the life of that candle will not be shortened. So let me tell you a little bit about that fire. And if you remember just one thing from what I say today, please remember this, that at this very moment, there are more nonviolent peacekeepers, there are more mediators, there are more peace builders, there are more conflict resolvers, there are more nonviolent civil resistors on the planet than at any other time in history. That is not inconsequential. So the next time you get your feed on whatever screen you're looking at of the latest breaking news, remember that. Remember that the number of people who are actively working and giving their lives for peace is growing. So let me tell you how this fire came to me. 20 years ago, I was part of a fellowship sitting in a classroom called the University of Creation Spirituality in Oakland, California. I had just started a class, or a section on the poet mystic Rumi. You know, out beyond wrongdoing and right doing, there lies a field. I'll meet you there. So this section had just started. It was being taught by a Sufi. And I was sitting in class with my notebook and daydreaming, and I came to her staring into my eyes and saying, and your job is to enter the heart of your enemy. And I looked at her and then quickly looked away and checked to see if my classmates were all still sitting there, and they were. We didn't know each other. She had never met me. I had never met her. And I wrote in my notebook, enter the heart of my enemy. That's a good place to rip it out. And further down the page, I wrote, don't go back to sleep. This could change your life. So from that moment on, I was challenged to my very core about the way in which I worked, the way in which I organized, the way in which I saw the world. That was us versus them, right versus wrong, good versus evil. Of course, I always picked the right side. 50% plus one meant that we won. And when the student's ready, indeed, the teachers appear. And I was challenged to my very core to start seeing and understanding life from a point of unity. And that took me places that I never imagined. A year later, I was sitting in a Buddhist monastery with a Vietnamese monk whom a year ago I had never heard of, a guy named Thich Nhat Hanh. And I quickly learned I was way over my head. It was 12 hours of silence a day, and the other 12 hours we didn't talk very much. And I was clearly with people who were focused on very different things than whether the Cubs were going to make the World Series. And yet, one of the things that Thich Nhat Hanh taught was that we were no longer at the place in history where we can afford to take sides. The stakes are just too high. And he was saying that in 1999. So it was riding on a bus, leaving Plum Village, the monastery, with my ever-present notebook, I wrote a reflection piece on what a nonviolent peace force might look like. So fire. 20 years after riding on that bus, I'm sitting in an area in the northern part of South Sudan, the newest nation in the world, and a nation that has been plunged into another bloody civil war starting in 2013. I was sitting in a dusty camp called Bentiu, where over 100,000 people had fled for some semblance of safety. And every day, the women have to leave that area and collect firewood. They have to come home and make fires. They cook. And as we see painfully, rape has been weaponized. Gender-based violence is part of a strategy of war. And so these women face rape both by government soldiers as well as by rebels. What we have found is that when 3 to 5 of the unarmed civilian peacekeepers accompany 20 to 30 women, the soldiers look and then turn the other way and leave them alone. With one exception, this has been totally successful over the past 5 years. And that exception was when one of our people was thrown to the ground, but our team quickly intervened and were able to stop that. This is one of the 10 methods that nonviolent peace force members who now come from 35 different countries use to protect civilians not only in South Sudan, but places like Iraq, Burma or Myanmar, and Mindanao. We do not bring more guns into areas that are already riven with violence. We don't need to. In fact, we can be more effective without guns. And we have shown that this has worked in a variety of violent places around the world. So it can no longer be dismissed as impossible. In fact, there's over 40 organizations that are now doing unarmed civilian protection in various parts of the world in 24 different places. And that's not because any of us went out and organized. It's because people are picking up and understanding this way of dealing with violent conflict. Excuse me, I moved to the wrong page. The French paleontologist and theologian Teilhard de Chardin, who is someone who has troubled and challenged me since I was 20, said there exists in all beings a common center through which they meet together at a deeper level. We have that common center. Beyond the violent divisions that rage across our country lies a greater unity. We cannot ignore the white supremacy and the misogyny that is given license today and is so brought out into the open. Such hate must be resisted and transformed, but at the same time, we can walk bravely through the flames of hatred to the place of creativity and unity that lies deep within all of us. We are not going to get much farther if we continue to have us versus them. Within all of us flickers that moral imagination that can be addressed, that can be opened up, that can be supported. And Teilhard also said that, someday, after mastering the winds and the waves and the tides and gravity, we shall harness for God the energies of love. And then, for a second time in the history of the world, man will have discovered fire. It is within all of us. So I do want to close by saying that I humbly accept this award on behalf of those who have shared their dreams and their hopes and their prayers and their aspiration, their labor, often volunteer labor, their wealth to co-create nonviolent peace force, and especially those unarmed civilian protectors who are in war zones working with local partners, especially women's protection teams, at this very moment. And I can only truly accept this award on their behalf. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mel. Al Berkeley, advisor to presidents, CEO of NASDAQ, director of the World Economic Forum USA, designer of cybersecurity for the nation's financial realm. If you have a full, free afternoon, you might possibly be able to read through Al Berkeley's list of accomplishments. But what you're going to learn from this gentleman today is the true value of money. Al Berkeley knows what investment in the right hands can accomplish for the benefit of all humanity. And add to that, Al's masterful power to make sure that ample amounts do get into the right hands. I invite you to listen to Mr. Alfred Berkeley and discover the most powerful method of investment.
Well, Bart, I hope I can live up to that introduction, and I'm delighted to be here. I'm losing my voice a bit, so I hope you can hear me with the microphone. I thought I'd tell you a little bit about Princeton Capital Management's journey to partnering with one of the UN-affiliated organizations and what we're trying to accomplish. Princeton Capital is an investment management firm, has mainly wealthy families and individuals as clients, and we just sort of perked along as a money management firm, didn't think much about the UN or any of the UN's programs. But over the years, I had been going to the World Economic Forum in Davos in January and had met two remarkable men, one a fellow named Roland Schatz, who runs a media analysis company in Vienna. He tracks what is said in thought leadership journals and newspapers and TV shows and radio shows, and can tell you where an idea starts in the world and who speaks for it and who speaks against it. The company's called Media Tenor. If I see some notes being taken. And he introduced me to another interesting man, a man named Michael Moeller. And over the 19 years that Michael and I were at Davos together, Michael kept getting promoted in the United Nations and ended up being the chief operating officer in Geneva. Well, they reached out to me about 2 years ago and said, we would like you to create a stock index, not unlike the NASDAQ 100, that tracks companies around the world, that contains companies around the world that are committed to the Sustainable Development Goals. Could I see a show of hands if you know what the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations are? Well, let me take just a minute and explain it. You may remember in 2000 there were a lot of hoopla in launching the Millennial Development Goals. The Millennial Development Goals were very high-minded goals: clean air, no poverty, gender equality, about a dozen of them. They went nowhere. In 2015, when they were supposed to be coming to fruition, there was a working group put together at the United Nations by Michael Moeller, who said, how did we mess that up so badly? What did we do wrong? And they had an insight that I think is a powerful insight, and that is, on the one hand, they must try again, that these issues were too important not to just keep working on. The second insight they had was that the Millennial Development Goals were the agreement and the signature and the tasking of nation states to get change made. And they realized that nation states are policy wonks, that it's not where work gets done. The Sustainable Development Goals, the second effort, of which there are 17 goals and 169 targets under them, is aimed at cities. It's cities where people live, not nation states. It's city politicians who fix potholes, who get water clean, who are in a position to implement the issues around poverty or gender equality or any of the other 17 goals. And this is it sounds so simple, but it was a profound insight of how you actually get change done, particularly in these Western democracies, where there's no central command and control. Democracies are a very interesting beast. You know, there are about 195 countries in the world. There are about a dozen of them that are pretty robust democracies. There are about a dozen of them that are just horrible dictatorships. And then in the middle, you've got this broad spread of good and bad mixed in that make things very difficult to get done. So what we did is I said to Michael Moeller and to Roland Schatz, I said, you know, I can build you an index around these companies that are hewing to the Sustainable Development Goals, but why don't you just go to the NASDAQ? The NASDAQ has an index engine there. And basically they said, well, we've already talked to all of the people that create indices in the stock market, and they want to subordinate our brand to theirs. So there's the politics of branding entered in it. And I said, well, I'll help you with this. And as I dug into it, I realized it was a much more difficult problem than the NASDAQ 100 index, which is entirely quantitative. A company that is in the NASDAQ 100 index is in it, and the index is dependent on its stock price. So it goes up and down with the collective movement of the companies that are in that index. Taking on the Sustainable Development Goals gets you a dimension that's quantitative, but also gets you a dimension that's qualitative. One person's good is another person's bad. How do you interpret the issues in the 17 goals that are based on compassion as opposed to being based on physics like carbon footprints? So there's all this trade-off that's going on. We've been helping the UNGSII Global Sustainability Index Institute, which is a nonprofit set up outside the UN by UN officers so that it can criticize. One of the really interesting problems with the United Nations is it can't stop any initiative that it starts because you get all these countries getting jobs and development money from them. There are about 52 or 53 UN-related organizations, but most of them, very few of them are funded through dues. Most of them are funded like UNICEF of having to go out and raise money from the public, so that there's a huge charitable donation issue there. Well, UNGSII was set up to be able to call out not only the good things that were happening, but the bad things that were happening. And you can't do that inside the United Nations because of the protocols of everybody being more or less equal. And particularly if you criticize a large player, they just hold their dues back, and that puts the UN in a very tenuous position. Well, we've been working with a strategy of saying, okay, the entire UN is working on the Sustainable Development Goals. Let's look and see what's not being done. Let's look and see which goals are oversubscribed, if you will. Like any event with human beings involved, there's a herding influence. There's an awful lot of interest in gender equality. A lot of companies will, particularly the democracies, will talk about gender equality. And other more difficult problems, like cleaning up the ocean, have less money, less talent, less support coming after them. There is a huge opportunity in the range of activities there. And we said, how can we figure out what's not being done, raise special purpose financing vehicles for that, focus that money on that, and get things started. We view ourselves as an and effort, not an or effort. Most organizations see themselves as competing with other people. We would love to have dozens of people pop up and work on, for example, the ocean. We think that the more the merrier, but we want to be able to focus resources, particularly from family offices and pension funds and insurance companies, who have, insurance companies particularly interesting in family funds, interesting because they can have a long-term horizon. So we're particularly interested in, I'll give you two examples that we're working on right now. We have the ability to run a general fund, But we have two special initiatives. One is to finance 6,000 electric buses so we can get rid of the diesel pollution in Mexico City and perhaps in Istanbul and maybe in one of the cities in Argentina. There are other groups financing electric buses. We welcome that. We want to be supplemental to that. We're not trying to compete with them. We just want to put more money against that problem. The second project we have, and by the way, finding out how to get a return on money on buses is pretty straightforward. You buy them with the money that's put up front. You lease them to the cities. You get a share of the tolls in the fare box. You have a contract over a long period of time to recover the cost, and you can probably predict a return that works for investors who want to participate in good causes, but who need a return of some type. The second one I want to tell you about is a little more interesting and a little more difficult, and I think we've got a clever way of dealing with it. Did you know that there used to be about 1 trillion trees more in the world than there are now? About 1 trillion trees have been cut down for agriculture and for homes, but mainly for agriculture. So Roland Schatz, who is the managing director of UNGSII, challenged us and said, can we plant 1 trillion trees? That's a big number. I gave a talk like this and said 1 billion, and he corrected me from the floor. He said, no, we've got to have a higher goal. We may not make it, but we have to have the highest goal. So we are trying to get a special purpose vehicle funded that would start there, and there are lots of people planting trees around the world. The first effort we're making is to catalog some of that so we can not be competing but be complementing. We've got family offices, we've got pension funds, we've got the World Bank having this conversation. We've got some insurance companies that are interested, and we want to figure out how to supplement what's already going on in tree planting, the lungs of the earth, as we heard earlier. We want to supplement the existing efforts and plant trees, lots and lots and lots of trees. So, Bart, I really appreciate your drawing attention to these efforts and giving me a chance to talk about them, because the sustainable development goals themselves are asking mankind to up its game. But these specifics, like planting a lot of trees or getting a lot of diesel buses off the road, are tangible enough and local enough and imposing enough for people to get their head around. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much, Al. That's great. All right, now, I want you to envision your version of an NFL cheerleader. And now keep the energy, keep the charming good looks, and do away with all the rest of the stereotype. Former football cheerleader Ramona Braganza took hold of her career and by vocation is now a celebrity fitness trainer who trains and helps the most fortunate members of our society. And by avocation, Ramona guides and trains the least fortunate, the victims of human trafficking. Launching her 321 Empower Foundation, Ramona helps rescue young women in India and right here in America, thank you, and trains them for jobs in the fitness industry, setting them on the track of independence. Ladies and gentlemen, Ramona Braganza, a lady whose new life solutions bring healing to the full spectrum of our community.
Hello, everybody. I'm very honored to be here today. I'm following in some giant footsteps, listening to Al and Mel. I really I'm like, I don't know if I'm worthy, but thank you very much for the honorable nomination. And Bart and your team at Prometheus Publishing, thank you, Dale Caldwell, and thank you, Mark Nathan. He's not here right now. Oh, there you are at the back, good. He's my business partner with the Power Glider Stretch FX. And I was walking this morning with my client that I'm training. His name is Michael Weatherly, and he's on a show called Bull. And we were doing his morning workout at 5 a.m., walking along the Hudson River. And I was telling him about today. I said, I can't train you later in the day, because he likes to do doubles. I said, I have something, I'm getting an award. And he made me do my speech. So I hope you enjoy it. I've got a couple exciting gifts that I'm going to hand out if you get the right answer. So we're going to start with the first thing. Yes, I started a foundation called 3-2-1 Empower, whose mission is changing girls' lives from trafficking to fitness trainers. I've been active my whole life, and it seemed like a natural fit. And I'll tell you my journey. It's been an unusual one, and I've really, I really love actually talking about it. So this should be a lot of fun. First of all, who said this quote? Because you're very big on quotes, Bart. So. The first wealth is health. Now, Michael didn't know it this morning, so I hope somebody here can tell me who said the first wealth is health. That would be a good one. Okay, I'll let you think about it. You can probably secretly Google it, and I'll give you the prize at the end. Okay, so I wasn't quite sure what I would do my talk on, and to keep it to the 10 minutes, I thought I would do the 7 traits of a self-made entrepreneur. I didn't start out as an entrepreneur, and I took a different route than most people, I guess. I just really did whatever I had to do that was in my heart. So here's the first trait I came up with. Who knows who Bianca Andreescu is? Say that again. Bianca Andreescu. She just beat in tennis Serena, right? So for me, as a young girl growing up in a small town in Canada, yes?
She beat Serena Williams in tennis.
That is correct. You will get the prize, my DVD after, and I will make sure I get it to you, all right? So she actually inspired, so when I was a young girl at 9 years old, I was a gymnast. From the age of 8 to 18, that's what I did. I lived in a small town in Canada in the 70s, and I was, because of the color of my skin, probably challenged more than other times. In other words, nowadays they call it bullying, but because I had gymnastics, it really gave me an inner strength. So I feel an athletic mindset plays a big part on if you're an entrepreneur. What I learned from it was focus. I learned commitment, hard work, determination, and it was really my life-saving thing that I went to. I also found that I built my resilience, because when you're an athlete, the mindset is everything, and if you watch that game, you really saw her at the end. It was all about her mindset. So it gave me a really good focus. The second trait is you have to recognize the people around you that support your goals. So I grew up in a family, small family, that traveled all the time. My parents were from India. They had moved to Germany. I was born in Germany. Then we came to Canada, where I grew up. But we were very much a tight-knit family, spent a lot of time together. And immigrant parents really, I think they inspire their kids to believe they can do anything. So that was me. At 9 years old, I thought I could do anything. The third trait is to make sure you have a huge dream, like dream way outside the box. So growing up in the small town, my dream was to go to Hollywood and become a star. I wanted to go to Hollywood and be a star. And I used some of the techniques that Bianca used. I was very excited to hear she does visualization. Back in those days, you had magazines like Tiger Beat and Teen Magazine. I pulled all those pictures out, stuck them on the walls. That's what I saw first thing I woke up and last thing at night. And I feel like I created my destiny. I also journaled, and I prayed a lot. And I told God, I said, if you can get me to Hollywood, I owe you one. I mean, I'm gonna find a way to give back. So this is something that I actually feel, if I look at my life, how it played out. I also said, if I'm single at 50, that's when I'm gonna do it. So anyway, time moved on, and I found that, get my notes. Okay, so I was ready to take a risk at 18. And because I was good at gymnastics, I found I could tumble really well and throw back handsprings. So the first job I got when I moved to Toronto, Ontario, is I got a job as a cheerleader for the CFL, which was the Toronto Argonauts. And I nailed it because I did back handsprings. So I was like, this is my secret weapon. This is great. I just have to do back handsprings everywhere. So I thought, well, this isn't a big enough arena. I've got to go to the NFL. So that was my goal. And I went off to LA. I had $4,000 I saved working in a factory. My dad gave me his credit card and said, off you go, call me if you need me. And I landed in LA at 20. I auditioned, I made it on the team, and that was pretty much it. I was cheerleader for 10 years. Now, this was during the start of fitness. It was the 80s. Does everybody know Gold's Gym? Okay, so Arnold was working out and all that stuff was happening. And I decided that I was going to do fitness contests because I could tumble. So I tumbled my way onto the cover of Muscle and Fitness magazine, and I tumbled my way through the show called Full House. I was on a roll. I was going to be a star in Hollywood, and everything was going great. And then suddenly, and this is my next trait, I'm on trait number 5, always remain flexible because the unexpected can happen. So I got this unusual offer from a producer who said, hey, you do gymnastics. Why don't you train my young actress? She needs to walk like a cat or move like a cat. So I did, and I thought, well, but that's not really in front of the camera, it's behind the scenes. But I accepted the challenge, and that girl was Jessica Alba. So she was 17 years old, I was in my 30s, and I thought, sure, I'll be her gymnastics coach. Off I went, trained her a couple times, and then she said, I want you to be my trainer. They need me to have a trainer. So that was pretty much the start of my new career, which was truly my calling. I think I set out to be an actress, but I saw what these real actors do, and they do a lot better job than I do. So being a trainer became great. I traveled around with Jessica for 12 years around the world. It was just her and I for the first 7. I was her mom, her sister, her trainer, her friend, everything. And then I ended up having other clients. Baby Bulge Be Gone was my postpartum workout I did with Jessica and Halle Berry. It was for new moms. My fitness industry grew. I had sponsorship deals. I built a 52-foot fitness truck. And it was all just because I said, I'm gonna do it. Yes, sure, I can do anything. And then, who said this? Life is like a box full of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. You put your hand up, so you... Yes, that's correct. So you will get my workout DVD. Does anybody have DVD players anymore? Anyway, I have a whole bunch of DVDs I gotta get rid of, so. So anyway, I hit the wall. I picked the wrong chocolate, I guess. Something happened to me, and I had been on a work permit, and my work permit was no longer valid. It was denied. And that was the end of my time in LA for a while. Now, when I hit that wall, I lost clients, I lost sponsorship deals, I was at the top of the mountain, and everything went away in 1 second. So when adversity hits your life, what do? Well, first you crawl up into a little ball and cry, but then you pretty much have to get back on your feet. And here's something that I learned: have a backup plan. So I had a backup plan. I had already started my company in Canada. I had a condo in Canada. I knew I had a business there, and I went back. And it pulled me completely out of my life in LA, which I had lived for 20-some years. I climbed Kilimanjaro during that time, and that was really fun. I was actually, I think, what managed to get me back on my feet, because I said, you know what, I'm down, but I'm gonna climb that mountain. I hate the outdoors. But sure, I'll go do it. After 9 days of no shower and no everything, you're like, I can do anything. So then back you go, and off you try again. And suddenly, my father had a stroke, and my mom had some heart surgery, and I had to be there. So I was there for all that, and I felt like, well, maybe I'm supposed to be here right now. I went to the cemetery, and I talked to my grandmother, the only person I know from India. And by the way, I never had been to India. I was very westernized, and I said, I really feel like I'm supposed to go back to India. I did that 3 days in a row. My BlackBerry at the time went off, and it was Vogue magazine India, and they wanted to do an article with me. So off I went back. I thought, I think I'm supposed to go. I'm gonna go and see what happens. And around that time, my dad wasn't doing so well. So a couple of years ago, he passed away, and when I was with him, I thought, what will my legacy be? You know, my father's is the family, but what's my legacy? Now I'm going back to India. I went back to India. It was a booming fitness industry there, and I thought I can maybe enter this space, but there were only male trainers, and it really bothered me. I thought, here I am, you know, I'm a female trainer, and here in North America we have mostly female trainers. Why are there no female trainers? So at that time, I thought, well, how can I give back? Because I turned 50 and I'd had a great life, and I was looking for two things. So one was how to give back, and one was how can I fix this problem? And suddenly this large pool of young girls showed up on my radar, and I thought, well, that's it. We have to take these girls who don't have job skills, give them this job skill, and everybody will be working. So that's really how my charity started and why I went in that direction. India called me. I was looking for a legacy, and this was something I could do easily. So my first group of girls that I found from Prerna, there was an organization named Prerna. They went and brought me into the red light district in Mumbai. I walked up to the building. There were young babies sitting on the floor. These were the babies of the ladies that I was going to meet later. And I ended up meeting the ladies and thinking, let's just work out. I don't know, I can't speak Hindi, but we're all going to just exercise. So I had them doing push-ups and running up and down the stairs, and they were giggling and laughing like any girl anywhere. And then the next time I went, I brought them 15 pairs of running shoes. 30 girls shared the shoes. And the third time I came back, I bought a trainer I found. She's the only female trainer in India, and she rides, it's called an Enfield. It's like a motorcycle. And she pulls up on the bike, and I go, you're that girl. You are going to go and train my girls, because this is a scary job. So we've been doing it now for a year in India, and we have 10 graduates. One girl is ready to find a job. My next trip back is in October, and that's when I hope to see whether I can walk her into a gym. But the really interesting thing is I got into this because I felt it was my calling. I felt India is a big part of who I am. When I came back to the US, I started to do fundraising in Orange County and also in my hometown in Brockville, Ontario. I was put in touch with a 15-year-old girl in my hometown that went to my high school who had been trafficked. So I was going to teach her exercise, and that's what I did. And in Orange County, I was put in touch with all these organizations that work with girls who live in safe houses. There's so much trafficking in our own country that we could use this program. The program comes between recovery and rescue and recovery. So between rescue and recovery, there's nothing for these girls. And I feel exercise empowers from within. So my mission, I guess, is to bring this to our world and to continue what I'm doing in India. And I'm sorry, I'm sure I'm way longer than 10 minutes, so sorry. But I have these DVDs, and everybody can get one if you want. I've got a bunch in the car. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ramona. I kept guessing Homer for the quotes. I was wrong. Very few people really feel the heartbeat of their city as intensely as Jock Howard. Jock Howard is, well, what you would call Trenton, New Jersey's ambassador without portfolio. Certainly no job or single title could cover all the efforts that he undertakes. Under the banner of civic engagement, Jock unifies people behind art and reading and performance, athletics, gardening, even urban resurrection. And springboarding from his Trenton 365 radio show, which he hosts, Jock builds people together. He showcases talents that do exist, fosters those in the making, and he builds pride. So, how do you vitalize an historic city, imbuing it with the fertile soil for all the people who live there today? Follow Jock Howard around for a week and find out.
Well,
You kind of threw me off there, Bart, but first of all, I want to take a couple of moments here just for us to have a brief moment of silence. And the reason why I like to do that is it's a great opportunity for all of us to center ourselves. Not a lot of time, just join me for a moment or two. All right, thank you very much. So first of all, I want to start off by saying thank you for this wonderful facility. I think it's important for us always to give thanks, not only in our everyday lives, but also in the lives that we live in environments like this. This facility, this educational opportunity here, in addition to that, all the people who are here as well. I'm going to run through a series of things, but I think Bart did a great job of introducing me. I don't have one particular thing that I'm super passionate about. I have more irons in the fire than prongs on a fork. And at the ripe age of almost 51, I know that this is not going to change anytime soon. I assume it's just going to continue to get bigger. So I'm going to run through some notes that I have here and just talk about a few things. Bart knows this, and several others do. I was born in Trenton, New Jersey, but grew up in Ewing Township, which is a suburb of Trenton. And it was a rural part of Ewing at the time because we didn't have any sidewalks, there was one traffic light, etc. I lived in a house where I'm the youngest of 7 children. 2 doors from me lived my maternal great aunt, and 3 doors away lived my maternal grandparents. My mother is one of 13. So at any given time, there were dozens of people around. Sunday dinners were huge. And my grandfather, Jimmy, who was a General Motors shop steward, ruled this village. And he was a little man, much smaller than me, and I am vertically challenged as well, but he was smaller than I am today. In addition to that, he ruled this community very specifically. It was a man's world. In addition to that, I'm going to demand respect, and I'm going to expect everyone to respect me. That was something that I didn't realize when I got older that it would make so much sense. Fast forward after college in Philadelphia with a background in art and fashion, marrying my beautiful wife who's here today and having a beautiful daughter as well, we moved back to Trenton. When I moved back to Trenton, everything was going great. I had a wonderful corporate job in the industry that I wanted. I was going to New York and Philadelphia when I needed to or wanted to. It was fantastic. Well, that corporation decided that they were going to restructure and that they were no longer going to manufacture clothing in the United States. Therefore, I took a package and decided what I was going to do, or had to decide what I was going to do with the rest of my life. After about 2 years of searching and trying to figure this out, I was fortunate enough to land a job in the financial industry, working for Merrill Lynch. Most of you know that the financial crisis happened and Merrill Lynch was acquired by Bank of America. I was part of the transition team. However, being part of that transition team came with some health challenges as well. Most of us in corporate America, especially in a leadership position, know of the stress that is involved with leading a team of individuals. So at that time, I decided that it was probably best for me to not spend my time in corporate America, so I left. By the advisement of my doctor, of course. After several years of trying to figure out what the next retrenching would be, I decided that I would hyper-focus on the city where I was born, which was Trenton. I started to join several nonprofit boards, ones that were interested or showcased an interest in what I was interested in. So I joined the Isles Inc. board, as well as Artworks Trenton, Care Trenton, and a few others. During that time, I got an opportunity to really meet my neighbors. And when I say meet my neighbors, I mean develop a deep relationship with my neighbors. Not just a cursory wave as I was going to my car or walking in the house, but having communal dinners, shoveling out their parking spot as well, making sure that if a delivery package was left on their step, I would take that package and bring it to them later. Since then, we've developed a local civic association that won a citywide award. Several of my neighbors are now some of my really good friends, so much so that they're now part of our nuclear family. And we spend time together on a regular basis, having dinner and entertaining each other. I'm going off my notes here because this often happens to me. I get filled with the Spirit. And when I say the Spirit, I mean some people would take that and put it into a structure of a particular religion. I think I've elevated beyond that. My faith is spiritually driven, but it's because I fully believe that all human beings are created in the image of God. Therefore, if that is my belief, I need to live that out every day. I need to be concerned about when my local neighbors in my community, but also those around the world, don't have clean water, don't have educational opportunities, or they're suffering from social injustice, etc. And I passionately take those to heart. I don't have the opportunity to travel around the world doing these things, but what I do have is the ability to do them right where I live, which is in Trenton, New Jersey. Some of the initiatives that I focus on there is the Library Boxes of Trenton, which is an initiative that Bart, Jackson, and Prometheus Publishing have supported in the past. We had, at the time, 4 public libraries in the city of Trenton, 3 of which are now closed. We have 1 public library for all of the city of Trenton, and it's located in one of the least populated portions of the capital city. So my initiative was to gather some old newspaper boxes that were discarded, partner with the local arts community, upcycle them into free library boxes to distribute reading materials to anyone. To date, we've distributed well over 10,000 pieces of reading material for free throughout the city of Trenton and beyond. Another project that I'm extremely passionate about is having an indoor and an outdoor skate park built. Many people don't consider recreational sports opportunities when they think about inner cities. We think about the traditional big 4, baseball, basketball, football, maybe even soccer. Well, in the city of Trenton, it's been a destination site for skateboarding for people around the world. Even our local politicians don't even know that. So because of my relationship with the local community, we're working on a grassroots DIY effort to have 2 skate parks built in the city of Trenton, 1 indoor and 1 outdoor. To date, we've had dozens of young people get on skateboards for the first time and to experience this recreational opportunity. And it's actually even translating over into them doing a better job in school. So I'm excited about that. Partnering with nonprofits is also something that behooves us when we consider the work that we do. Mercer Street Friends is a county-wide nonprofit that focuses on food distribution. They're the food bank for Mercer County, New Jersey. Locally, we partner with them to distribute food on a regular basis in our local neighborhood. And to date on that, we've distributed food to well over 1,500 families for free. My next initiative is one that oftentimes makes people perk up a little bit, and usually for the wrong reason. Cannabis is a plant that grows around the world. It's a natural plant. Most recently, we've realized the medical benefits of this product, of this plant. In addition to that, we know that the industry is coming. It's approximated to be $50 billion by 2025. Think about that, $50 billion industry. In New Jersey, it's a little difficult because of the pharmaceutical companies that are here, but I'm pushing that initiative mainly from the perspective of the average person getting involved in this industry. This is going to be the biggest redistribution of wealth in most of our lifetimes. To date, less than 2% of Latino Hispanics, Blacks, and women are involved in this industry. Again, it behooves us that if we want to have this redistribution of wealth, to stop social injustice, and to fight recidivism, we need to consider what are some of the factors, and one of them is cannabis. So in closing, I'd love to have a conversation with each and every one of you. If you want to be a guest on my radio and TV show, that would be fantastic. If not, I'd love to have a meal with you and talk about what you're doing and to see how we can partner, and so that we can consider about how we can all work together to build a better community for everyone. In closing, I thank you all very much. I appreciate Prometheus Publishing and my relationship with Bart Jackson. Thank you very much. Let's have a good night.
Thank you, Jack. would all of you please form a line at the end of this, so who want to get on a skateboard again? I see Al is lining up. There we go. The reason that business grows so big and produces so much is not that it employs human energy. It's that it employs organized human energy. And that is the rare ability that Ms. Lisa Orloff brings to the fore in the face of disaster. Immediately following the September 11th disaster in Manhattan, Lita stepped in amid what I call the compassionate chaos and displayed a desperately needed ability to organize all the volunteers and equipment into an effective accomplishing force to rebuild and to save lives. And in fact, she handled these so ably that she turned her back on a thriving fashion career and launched the World Cares Center, which trains and dispatches volunteers standing ready around the globe. And Lisa and her World Care team are living proof that disaster can indeed bring out the very best in us.
Thank you, everyone. I'm going to time myself. And I also don't have notes because my husband says I don't do a good job off of notes. I don't follow them anyways. So here we go. Thank you, Bart, very much. It's an honor to meet you and to be here tonight or this afternoon. Thank you, Fairleigh Dickinson University. This is an amazing campus. And I am honored to be in the company of my fellow awardees who are very impressive, passionate, and driven humanitarians. For me, the work that I do today, like some of you, was never on my radar. I was in sixth grade in Mr. G's homeroom, and he was going to take us on a field trip to New York City. And at the same time, there was a TV movie called Scruples with Lindsay Wagner. Anybody remember that? And it was about the fashion industry. And I said, I am going to be a fashion designer in New York City, and I was going to have my own collection by the age of 25. And so I pursued that. And my mom, who was a very forward-thinking businesswoman at that time, really helped me in so many ways that was really beyond her own knowledge, her own comfort zone. I remember I had to go take a life drawing class in Norwalk, and I'm 16 years old. Does anybody know what life drawing is? It's naked. I didn't know that at 16. You know, I was all tough. I'm going to do this. You know, I walk in the room. I'm like, but I needed to do that to get into Fashion Institute of Technology. And I did that. I went to Fashion Institute of Technology. I graduated. I worked for a couple of companies, and then I started my own business and my own collection. And I love New York City. I love the energy. I love all that it has allowed me to do. And I am a consummate New Yorker. And on September 11th, when we were attacked, I was heartbroken. I was appalled. I was angry. And I was driven. And I felt that we all, anyone that has ever seen a Broadway show, anyone that has ever visited the city, and certainly me, who has benefited so much since I was a sixth grader, had an obligation to do something. And I went out and I tried to do something, but it was more difficult than you could imagine. There were lines at St. Vincent's Hospital of people trying to give blood, but as we very well know, unfortunately, blood was not needed because we didn't have a whole lot of survivors. Then I found my way to the Jacob Javits Center which, by the way, was the convention center on 34th Street that I was supposed to show my collection at a week later. Obviously, that was canceled. And I ended up managing spontaneous volunteers, citizens, just like all of you, who wanted to come out and help. Because disasters take away not only physical property, but they take away a sense of control, a sense of, in some cases, faith. And the way to regain that control and feel the comfort of others is to volunteer. And it's something that we should all be grateful for. Unfortunately, 18 years ago, it was not popular. Our own emergency managers were overwhelmed. They could barely rally what they could do because FEMA was destroyed in the attacks. Office of Emergency Management was in the building. So when you have thousands of people at your door saying, "We're here to help, tell us what to do," they were turned away. I went to the Jacob Javits Center. There were people wrapped around the block, one little card table with one well-known agency taking names that they would later throw away of people who wanted to volunteer. And I walked up to them and I said, "How can I help you?" They said, "We don't need your help." I hesitated. I said, "Really?" I said, what's that on the table, flyers for people? I said, "Well, why don't I go down and just hand out those flyers so that those people that didn't qualify for whatever you're trying to do here, if they don't qualify, they could just leave and go elsewhere." And I was then approached by the Salvation Army, who saw that I was a doer, and they asked me to help manage their IRV, their feeding truck, because now responders started to show up. Manhattan South set up a mobile unit to vet and dispatch approved responders down to ground zero. Supplies started coming in. So I was helping, and then the Javits Center came over to me and said, "See all that stuff?" I said, "Yes." They said, "Can you please help us organize all of that?" This time frame literally is within a 24-hour period. It seems like a lifetime. And I began to organize that, and they kept bringing me spontaneous volunteers, the most amazing people wanting to help. Doctors, nurses, professors, housewives, executives. And we organized together, and we started to see people come up from ground zero asking for the supplies that we had. Exhausted, covered in soot, looking for boots to be replaced because they were working on the pile and the rubber was burning off the boots. Needing personal protective equipment to keep them safe. And I said, they're coming up, but how many of there are you that can't come up? That can't come and get this stuff? I said, "You know what, I'm gonna go on the next truck down to ground zero." And I ripped out a map out of the phone book. Remember those? Yeah? And I took scraps of paper and I wrote my cell phone number down. And I went around ground zero. And I got a lot of, "Honey, what are you doing down here? Go on home." You know, a lot of my first responder buddies, you know, didn't really understand who I was and what I was doing. "What organization are you from?" "I'm just a volunteer." "What, just a volunteer? What's the name of that organization? I don't really hear of it. What is it?" No, I'm just a New Yorker trying to help." "Is that a different organization?" "No, I'm at the Javits Center. I'm organizing donated supplies. You guys are coming up to get them. What do you need?" And I went around and I compiled this list, and we delivered supplies until a formal supply chain could be organized. About 2 weeks. Seems like 2 years. We were joined by the Army National Guard. Lieutenant J. Kazor. Lieutenant J. Kazor came to me and he said, "Can can you please do me a favor? I said, sure. He said, we're deployed here, however, I can't leave because I don't have orders to leave. Can you fill a prescription for me? Absolutely. Sent my volunteers to Dwayne Reed, who were very generous. They filled the prescription. I came back, I handed it to him. He was amazed that I could get that in an hour. It's New York City, even though it was 9/11. And he said to me, anything I can do for you, you let me know. And I warn you all, never say those words to me. And I said to Lieutenant J. Kazar, I need a truck. And I need some people. Do you think maybe we could do that together? He said, give me 45 minutes. I have to put in a requisition. And that began an incredible relationship with a group of people I had never worked with before. Military personnel. These young people's lives changed overnight. They were weekend warriors, and now they were going to be real warriors. And we deployed together down to Ground Zero. We delivered body bags for the parts that were being found in the pile. I got magazines for them to keep their minds off of things at night. And they taught me the incident command system. They taught me logistics. They taught me why you do certain things in disaster response. And they gave me respect as a citizen that was really unprecedented. We then moved on to work with FEMA. And these three women, Bernadette Frecker, Susan Jensen, and the other one escapes me, sorry, said incorporate. You have to incorporate. If you're going to be respected and people are going to work with you, you need to incorporate as an NGO. You need to join this network. And we did. And we called ourselves World Care Center, and our first program was September Space. September Space was a healing center that provided holistic services to over 45,000 rescue workers, their families, and survivors and disaster volunteers. First, those that suffered from the emotional implications of working in this kind of trauma response, and then later on, unfortunately, because of the physical impact. In 2007, the mayor said, we're going to transition into 3 city-run centers. Please work with us to transition your constituents. By that time, we already realized that we needed to address the root cause of why so many people were impacted emotionally and now physically. And we developed a curriculum that teaches citizens to prevent disasters and know how to take care of themselves when disaster strikes. A curriculum that teaches people who want to be disaster volunteers how to do so safely and effectively. And local leader training so that every faith-based leader, every organization, every grassroots organization, their leaders who own that social capital within the community have the ability to lead their constituents safely and in a coordinated way. We didn't really know how important this was going to be, but in today's world with active shooter, with hurricanes, with tornadoes, with tsunamis, we need to empower every single individual to be the best that they can be, to help others, but to be safe. And so today, we have 3, maybe 4 programs. We have 3 programs. We train. We have classroom training in the community, and we have online training, because you can't avoid technology. I tweeted about everything, by the way. We have a virtual emergency operations center to put the same tools that emergency managers use to coordinate in the hands of grassroots leaders. And then we just started an initiative called the Boots on the Ground exercise. Super duper fun. I want you all in there with boots. It's in next year. It's our 3rd year. And it's where we bring people together in a physical environment to practice the skills that they've learned together. Citizens, first responders, faith-based leaders, and veterans. Because we started with veterans, and we continue with veterans. They are team leaders, but they're also finding a place in disaster management to reintegrate themselves using the skills that they have. The opposite side of all that training and communication and practicing is that we deploy. And I'm over time, but I'm going to take it because I have the mic. Come take it from me. I don't know if you other people in the audience have this feeling that you never do enough, that you're not making enough of an impact. Human nature, we talk about it. We deployed to Haiti during the earthquake, and we trained a team of Haitians. It was led by a woman who had lost her mother. And, bless you, and we did some good work, helping and empowering and training the community. Not coming in a big team. Sometimes it was just me. Sometimes it was me and one of my partners going in and training this community. And they were able to host medical clinics. They were able to host distribution on their own. But the most impactful thing is that when Hurricane Matthew hit Haiti and hit Jeremy, the South Island, the team that I had trained in Haiti called me and said, our team's in Jeremy. We've done the assessments. We've trained local leaders. We know what the needs are. Can you help us with water filters? They had done this all on their own. And that's success. Took 5 years, but that's success. At home, during Hurricane Irene, we were the lead coordinator for the state of New Jersey, organizing grassroots groups and known volunteer groups to do muck and gut operations. That's cleaning out the homes after flooding. We trained a group in Jersey, and the same thing. When Superstorm Sandy struck, I called them immediately. I said, what do you guys need? What are you doing? They're like, Lisa, we don't need a thing. You taught us how to do this, and we're doing it. So those are some proud moments. I still feel like we're not doing enough. Still, I feel like we'll never do enough. However, the champions are those local leaders. Those are the champions that turn the pain and suffering of what they're going through in disaster, and they turn it into good. And they help others. And I am gifted because I get to work with them, because I get to experience that goodness. And I get to do my best at protecting them. So, my name is Lisa Orloff, and I am a spontaneous volunteer. Thank you for listening.
Lisa, that was fabulous. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. In 2008, Sheldon Himmelfarb wrote, "There's a growing recognition among policymakers that media should be a building block of any comprehensive peace-building strategy." I'm not sure that policy makers or the media were aware of that, but Sheldon knew. As an independent filmmaker in Bosnia and other conflict spots, Sheldon had already proved the media's peace-building power. And now today, in the Peace Tech Lab, which he has founded, Sheldon adds the tools of the cell phone, digital real-time information servers, and a host of technologies, all enlisted to quell hate and halt violent conflict. These are the fuels that Sheldon and his dedicated Peace Tech team feed into the flame of human creativity. With them, a growing army of entrepreneurial folks are waging peace around the world. So take a look at what the right tools in the right hands can do. Sheldon?
Lisa, can I borrow your high heels? Thank you very much, Bart, for that really generous introduction. Thanks for those kind words. I wish my mom were here. She might actually believe it. Although she would be annoyed that I am the only thing standing between everyone and happy hour here. So I will be direct and get right to the point. It is a great honor to be here in such an inspiring company. It's been honestly amazing for me to hear everybody's personal story. So let's just give a round of applause to all these people who have come before me. It has, honestly, I really wish this room were filled with students because they honestly need to hear these kinds of journey of social entrepreneurs and how they got here. So it's awesome to be part of this inaugural class of Prometheus Award winners. As you heard, I'm Sheldon Himmelfarb. I'm the founding CEO of the Peace Tech Lab in Washington, and we are an independent, nonprofit organization that was born out of the United States Institute of Peace almost 5 years ago now. And our mission, simply stated, is to amplify the power of technology to save lives and promote social good above its power for harm and hatred that you hear about all the time in the news these days. And how we do this honestly makes my job one of the best jobs on the planet. Because every single day, we at the lab work with courageous peace builders around the world. These are people who are fighting corruption, who are preventing hate crimes, people who are defending human rights, people who are countering gender violence, people who are struggling to tackle the food and water insecurity that comes with climate change. Every single day, we get to work with these extraordinary people to help them do more, better, faster with the great work they're already doing by using tech. And that's really what tech allows you to do. It's, when at its best, it's a force multiplier. And so far, we've trained leaders from almost 1,300 organizations in about 20 countries. And these organizations themselves work with millions of people around the world. Our tagline, Bart already stole my thunder here, our tagline is, we put the right tools in the right hands to build peace. And that really grew out of my own experience in the 90s, working, as Bart said, with media. I was working in Africa after the Rwandan genocide, where radio was used to incite mass killing. 800,000 people died in a matter of weeks, mostly Tutsis that had been killed by Hutus. And in the wake of that horror, I worked with an incredible group of journalists, local journalists, both Hutus and Tutsis, on a new radio station in neighboring Burundi. Because what's the first victim in war? The first victim is reliable information, the truth. And most of them knew someone who had been killed in the inter-ethnic violence, and I will never forget asking one of them, a young Tutsi who had lost a very close family member, how he felt working with Hutus, because this was our innovation, joint reporting teams so the information could be trusted, joint reporting by Hutus and Tutsis. And he told me that he did this because it was the only way to get peace. He would do anything to bring peace in his community, and he just wanted our help in doing that. And I left there in the 90s committed to figuring out ways to put the right tools and the right resources into the hands of people like him. And I've been doing it ever since with the help of many talented peace techers, as we have come to call ourselves, who I would, by the way, invite all of you to come meet if you ever come to Washington, D.C., or if you're ever in Nairobi, where we also have a small Peace Tech lab. So what's Peace Tech? I can see that question is running through your minds. Let me give you a quick couple of examples. Peace Tech is the sensor system deployed by a startup company called Hollow Systems that tracks the trajectory of missiles when they're fired and sends a warning out to civilians to get out of the way. It's saved hundreds of lives in Syria, and we incubated this company in our Peace Tech accelerator. In countries like Iraq, Venezuela, Mexico, Peace Tech is the Salama app that is being used by journalists in order to protect their own safety, the privacy, and their sources. Then there's the website, IPayToBribe.com, that is now being used in 15 countries in order to expose corruption. Or the geospatial mapping technology used in Cambodia by the Halo Trust in order to clear landmines. Or another couple of companies we've incubated in our accelerator, companies like Anona or Agromovio, and these are tackling the issue of food insecurity by connecting small farmers with international buyers using new supply chain technology. I could go on and on because there is a peace tech industry that is taking root that none of us ever imagined when we first coined this term about a decade ago. In fact, some of you may have seen last year in CNN, on their website, there was a headline around an article, Can the peace tech industry save the internet? And this came out in the middle of all the TechClash articles. So nearly every day, this industry, consisting of nonprofits, of startups, and even large companies, this industry is working on ways to leverage the best of tech to diminish conflict and violence, stop the spread of hate speech and fake news, empower citizens to participate fully in democracy, and so realize their own destiny. And behind every one of these organizations is a social entrepreneur, some of whom will stand here, I am sure, one day, knowing Bart and Lorraine and their commitment, some of whom will stand here one day to receive the Prometheus Awards. So I want to close by painting a picture for you of who that entrepreneur might be. Now, mind you, I have met hundreds of them over the last several years, but there's one in particular I want to tell you about. She really stands out because she really represents, in my mind, the future of peace tech and the future of this planet if we're smart about it in developing girls like this. And this is Anu. And I met Anu in India a couple of years ago when we were doing a training on how community leaders could use different tech tools to tackle the terrible problem of violence against girls and women in Mumbai, which Ramona already spoke about Mumbai. And Anu walks into the training that we're doing with two of her friends. All of these girls were about 13 years old. And they lived in the Dharavi slums in India, one of the poorest places on the planet. But they had downloaded the free MIT app maker online, using a shared laptop together, working with a mentor, and they had created a cell phone app that was designed to reduce the attacks on girls and women in their community. You hit one button, sounds a loud alarm. It sends a message to your network of friends and family, and it locates you. Now imagine, these are 13-year-old girls from the slums of India who are tackling gender violence in their community with tech, and which you can imagine is at great risk to themselves. It's just counterculture. And all they needed was a little bit of help, a little engineering help from my team to help them get it across the last mile, to get it into the Play Store. Folks, I have dedicated most of my career, as have most of my colleagues at the lab, to finding the Anus of the world, young and not so young, and giving them the resources they need to succeed at building a better, safer, more prosperous world. And there are many ways that you can join with us in doing this, so please come up to me later on at dinner and introduce yourself. And let me just say, you're incredibly good group to be as patient, listening to all of us here for all of this time. Let me say thanks to you all, and especially to my wife here in the front row, my wife Deirdre, who has heard all of this so many times before and actually still loves me, I think. So thanks very much.
All right, let's have all of the honorees, could you come up front? Please stand up here, because you deserve our applause and our salute. Are these not some of the most hopeful people that you have ever come across?